just going to say welcome, thank you for coming, and I'm going to introduce Renee Banks. Renee.
Thank you, Vernon. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome you all to the 26th Congressional Black Caucus Foundation COMPTO Transportation Braintrust. COMPTO extends our appreciation to Congressman Elijah Cummings for once again hosting this wonderful event. I'd like to acknowledge COMPTO leadership, our board of directors, and our council of presidents. If you're here, could you please stand, please? Thank you so much. Our theme this year is workforce development and emerging technologies. We look forward to hearing from all of our panelists and speakers today. At this time, I'd like to introduce our President and CEO, A. Bradley Mims. Brad?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am grateful that all of you took the time to come out with the iffy weather. It isn't terribly inclement, but we appreciate your taking the time to come out. You have been introduced to our National Board of Directors, and again, our newly elected Board of Directors. Want to point out one thing. We have significantly more diversity than we had, with a number of women who were elected to our board back in August. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that. And we are very, very happy to see all of our new board members. And we have a new board chair, Mr. Freddie Fuller. And you'll be hearing from Freddie, as Freddie will introduce Congressman Cummings a little later in the program. But it's truly an honor to have all of these folks here on the stage to address an issue that's near and dear to all of us. And as we're moving forward, you know, we are dealing with significant technology, especially with these things and other things that keep us connected 24/7 as we're moving forward. But as we're going forward with technology, and especially in the area of communications, we want to make sure that we deal with the whole issue of minorities and making sure that the minority community not get left behind. And again, we have an excellent panel who will address that. We have panelists from our local area here who are dealing with workforce issues, and we have folks who are futurists and as we move forward. So with that, I'd like to just move forward, and I'd like to introduce my old boss, my friend, and someone who's a significant friend of COMPTO, and that's the Honorable Rodney Slater. Rodney doesn't need a formal introduction. He has just been a part of COMPTO and has been a stalwart in the transportation community now and moving forward. So let me introduce Rodney, and Rodney will get us started.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to thank Brad for that warm and gracious introduction, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about just the tremendous contribution that he made as a member of my team at DOT. We have other members of the team in the audience, and we'll probably hear from a few of them as we go forward. But just last evening, I was at an International Aviation Club dinner, and it was appropriate for me to mention Brad and his role in all of our open sky activities. Open sky arrangements deal with how countries work together to promote aviation as a mode of transportation that ties us all together internationally. And Brad was right at the center of our activities during that period, and especially, as I mentioned last night, having just bumped into some representatives of the country of Nigeria earlier in the day, especially as relates to bringing African countries into the fold, if you will, when it comes to open sky agreements. I remember when President Obasanjo had been elected president-elect, and the first conversation he had with then President Clinton was about removing signs in our airports. Some of you will remember those that said, "Don't travel to Nigeria." Well, Nigeria is the largest African country on the African continent. And President Obasanjo was saying, look, I plan to lead an economic revolution within Nigeria and to play a leadership role on the continent of Africa. We need to be tied to the largest economic power in the world. What can we do to address this issue? And I can tell you that Brad and other members of our team hit the ground running, addressing that issue. President-elect Obasanjo said, can we get it done in 6 months? President Clinton looked at him and said, well, if you can commit yourself to it, we'll commit ourselves to it, and if I can turn to quality leaders like Brad Mims, we can get it done, hopefully. We got it done in less than 6 months. And you had companies like those here present today, but in the presence then of a Boeing, saying not only will we make the case to sell our planes, but we'll also invest in their security technology. We'll also invest in training. We'll also invest in development. We'll bring to bear, if you will, the kinds of issues that we're going to discuss here today in our relationship with the U.S. Department of Transportation and its relationship to the Department of Transportation leaders on the continent of Africa and specifically Nigeria. And so that's just an example of the kind of potential that we're discussing here today. And we've got just the right leaders to help us have that kind of discussion. And so I wanted to just acknowledge Brad. I want to acknowledge him in his leadership role as the president of COMTO and the importance of the fact that COMTO is holding its 26th Braintrust. So not only did I benefit from COMTO and the relationship with COMTO during my tenure, and clearly Brad did, but there were others before us, and there have been others after us. And that's the point to be made. COMTO is an organization that is here to stay, here to continue to play leadership roles now with Secretary Chow and her leadership team, again, to ensure that there is always a place for all of you at the table of discussion, debate, and opportunity when it comes to transportation investment. And so, again, I value the relationship that I've always had with COMTO. COMTO actually gave me lists to share with then President-elect Clinton when he was making a decision about who to select for positions of responsibility in the Department of Transportation. And I remember hearing names that were names that I was hearing for the first time. But because they had the stamp of approval of COMTO, these are individuals who were offered to White House personnel and ultimately to the President, to the Vice President Gore. And many of them became members of our leadership team at DOT and across government. So again, I appreciate the work that COMTO has done in the past, the work that it continues to do, and the fact that at 26, we're going to have a 27th, a 28th. We're going to be here for a long time to come as we move forward. And rightly so, because transportation is at an inflection point. I mean, there are changes occurring across the transportation sphere that will revolutionize transportation as we know it. And frankly, we could not hear from a more powerful and more significant voice in that regard than Congressman Cummings right now. And so what I'd like to do is to turn the podium over to Chairman Fuller, who will bring forth the congressman, who will kick off this session as he has done so many, many times before. And so please, as we bring forth Chairman Fuller, let's just give the congressman a round of applause before he says a word, just to acknowledge all that he's done over the years.
Thank you, Secretary Slater, and good afternoon, Compto, and all our friends. I'm Freddie Fuller, National Chair of the Board of Directors of Compto, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm not going to be before you long because I know Congressman Cummings is always very enthusiastic, and I want to give him the floor and allow him to share his words of wisdom and knowledge with us. But before we get to him, I'm going to do a brief introduction. The Honorable Elijah Cummings is no stranger to Compto. He is our friend, our brother, our mentor, and our advocate. Congressman Cummings has dedicated his life of service to uplifting and empowering the people he is sworn to represent. He began his career of public service in the Maryland House of Delegates, where he served for 14 years and became the first African American in Maryland to be named Speaker Pro Tem. Since 1996, Congressman Cummings has proudly represented Maryland's 7th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. He currently serves as the ranking member on the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform. He is also a senior member of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, serving on both the Subcommittee on Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation and the Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials. Congressman Cummings.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fuller. And to you, I want to thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. Let me just, so that you all be clear, because sometimes we get things twisted. My leg had some surgery on my leg. I may be limping, but my mind is clear. I tell people that after spending 6 months in the hospital, you learn how to appreciate people and appreciate the moment. And I've stopped by here this morning to tell you, tell all of y'all, we are in a storm. Hello? Yes. This is a storm. And I am determined to fight with everything that I've got to make sure that the storm ends quickly. But in the meantime, the thing that concerns me most of all, see, I know the storm is going to come to an end. The question is, where will we be after the storm is over? Hello? Hello. All right, tweet that one. Where will we be when the storm is over? I thank God for Compto, and I really mean that. This organization is so very, very important, and the work that you do in so many areas, and here we are talking about new technology and today and how we make sure that we take advantage of it. But I want to thank all of our panelists, and Rodney, thank you, man, for all that you've done and continue to do, and all of our panelists. So I'm going to take my few minutes. They're going to say what they got to say, but I got to say something else. Let me be clear. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a fight for the soul of our democracy. We're in a fight for the soul of our democracy, and some people don't realize what is happening with this administration and its aiders and abettors. Say this is not just a one-man job now. And what I'm saying to you is that we have a duty, no matter where we are, to make sure. Remember what I said? We're going through a storm. But we've got to make sure that in the process, while we're going through it, that we don't become too cynical, that we don't give up the ship or the train or the plane. We got to make sure that we stay focused, and we have to take organizations like COMTO and strengthen them. Stay woke. We've got to strengthen these kinds of organizations because they will be the fabric, they will be the foundation to keep us going. Now, what's going on? And lightning and thunder. Praise the Lord. It's all right. It's okay because I want to get to the panel. Let me break it down. I just need 2 minutes. I think as I sit on as you also know, I also sit on the Oversight Committee. I'm the ranking member, and I get a chance to see what is happening in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, it is shameful. And while there may be an actor in the White House, it's one thing when you're acting and you're doing that, that apprentice kind of thing and all that. But when it begins to affect people on a day-to-day basis, affect their lives, like taking away the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, taking away transportation opportunities. Our governor in Maryland, the first thing he did was take away our red line. Republican government took it away in Baltimore. What I'm saying to you is that we've got to have advocates, particularly during this time, to constantly pound, no matter where you are, what you're doing. You got to say, you know what? We all pay taxes, and so we want to get our tax dollars back, and we want to make sure our people are employed. We want to make sure that our businesses do well and that they get their fair share. But we got to do it, and we cannot have one person sitting in a boardroom when they should be speaking up, not saying anything. If that's the case, find somebody else to take your place who will stand up for the things that are important to us. And so I leave you with just a simple message. We got to fight. We got to fight for everything in every way that we can. And I'm determined that what we are going to do on our part in the Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus is going to be, we're going to add quite a few members. But we're going to make sure that we make transportation a super priority. Our president promised us that he would deal with infrastructure. Anybody heard anything about any infrastructure? Come on now. Come on now. So we've got to be advocates for that infrastructure. We are the ones who have to advocate. Last but not least, a few weeks ago, we had a conference, Brother Mims. You're doing a great job. That's a nice time, man. What they usually say is, do you want it? Do you need it? We had I'm finished with this. We had a conference about a month ago, with Elizabeth Warren in Baltimore, Rodney. We were there talking about dealing with the opioid crisis. And I want you to think about this, because this really hit me, and it'll show you how important what you do, what types of things you do are. So we went, but what the bill does, we were talking about our bill, which would deal with the opioid crisis the same way we dealt with HIV/AIDS, Ron White. Have a comprehensive way of looking at it and giving, wraparound services and everything. And then they had all these wonderful experts from all over the country. They were good. They were great. But one man stole the show. He said, I'm an addict. He said, but, my problem is you can have all the treatment centers you want. You can have everything, He said, but how I'm going to get there? I mean, it's a simple question. I mean, he stopped us in our tracks. He said, how I'm going to get there? He said, I'm 55 years old, and I got arthritis. The buses don't run where I go. How I'm going to get there? And why am I telling you this? Please don't ever forget from whence you've come. Some of you all used to ride the bus. And I want you to constantly think about those bus riders and those folks who may not have the kind of transportation that will get them from place to place. I think it was somebody said this. I don't know whether it was Rodney or President Obama, but one of the two of them said something to this effect. If you want to see a community that is not doing well, go to one where transportation is at a minimum. Can't get no job, can't get to church, can't get to recreation, can't do anything. And so, again, I want to thank all of you for being here. I know this didn't have a whole lot to do with transportation, but I want you all to have a foundation for whatever we do here today, and to understand that we all have to be soldiers in the Army. We all have been blessed. We have been blessed to have the education that we have, to have the opportunities that we have, to be in a place where we can speak up for people who may not be able to speak up. Oh, God. Speak up for themselves, and people who don't even know what to say. They don't even know what the issues are. We have to speak up for them. We really do. And so, again, panel, thank you very much. And I'm going to be over here. All right?
Let's give the Congressman another round of applause. Now, you know that when things occur this November, that he will not be the ranking member of this very important committee, but he will be the chairman. And so we want to acknowledge that as well. And the thing about the congressman too is that he doesn't really need the title to be chair. I mean, you could hear his voice here, and you could understand that he was the chair and is the chair. I would say this though, you're going to hear some important information, but with the lights going on and off, two things came to mind that I want to share with you. And that is just a little prick of light can break the darkness. And we saw that, right? And with the information, the enlightenment that you're going to get, as you carry it to the communities where you serve, you'll be bringing light to the darkness. So keep that in mind. The other thing, and I got this in college, when you turn off the lights, I want you to listen to your own voice. it is a powerful thing. And especially when the lights are off. The congressman was talking about the soul. Well, when you turn off the lights and you listen to the voice that comes from the soul, it covers all of the space. It goes into the cracks and the crevices of every space. It feels the space. So as you listen, reflect on how powerful your voices are. And know that you can take this information that you get from these enlightened individuals at the point of action, that you can take that information, make it yours, and take it to places where they need the light. They need to be moved by the light, inspired by the light, encouraged by the light, because as the congressman said, in this moment of challenge, we cannot be discouraged. We cannot wither in the moment. We have to move forward with the resolve that was present in the days of our ancestors, as it surely is today, and that will carry us forward. We can get beyond these times, but we have to be, as you said, woke. With that, let me turn to our speakers, and do we not have a distinguished group coming to us today? I'm going to introduce them in turn, and then we'll come back and we'll hear from each and every one of them, taking, 2 to 3 minutes. They'll say a little bit about what they're doing. They'll sort of talk about it from the vantage point of technology, and then we'll have a very robust discussion, and we're going to get the audience involved as well, so that when we're done, we all feel sort of engaged in the moment, a part of it all. But what I'd like to do is start with John Jack Potter. John is the CEO of MWA and has had a wonderful history in the transportation field. But we're going to allow him to say a bit more about that later, and is on the cutting edge when it comes to dealing with some difficult issues that we read about every day in the press. So we'll hear from John Jack Potter in just a second. We'll also hear next then from Rena Davis. Rena is the Senior Policy Manager at Lyft. Oh, and is not Lyft lifting now and doing a great job. And at the cutting edge of this whole question of mobility and, frankly, ownership and how we deal with those dynamics. So it's a very, very important issue. And I can tell you just a little insight about the leadership and the character of this company. This company has really been a good corporate citizen from day one. Now, I say that because we may get into a discussion about some of its competitors, and you get into those kinds of issues. But those of you who are in this audience, who work in cities and states across the land, you know that this has been a good company from day one, working with you as a partner, and engaged in disruption, but not just for the sake of disruption. You follow me? Not just for its own bottom line, but for the benefit of all. And so we'll get into some of that. Then we'll hear from Diana Mendez. And you talk about a construction company that really has a good heart. HNTB, one of those companies. President of the Mid-Atlantic region. President of the Mid-Atlantic region. Very good. Next, we'll hear from Nalini Mani. She's the director and principal strategist initiatives for WMATA, and boy, do we hear a lot about WMATA. And so we're going to hear a lot from. You're laughing there, but it's all good, right?
Perfect company.
All good, and really they have worked through some very difficult issues, and we're all excited about that. Next, we will hear from Telva Magruder. She's the director and of sustainable workplaces, and especially when it comes to a company as mammoth as General Motors. I mean, you remember the line of years past where GM goes, so goes the nation. Well, this is a muscular automotive manufacturing company, not only of today but of the future. And when they talk about autonomous vehicles, they know about that which they speak, because they're at the cutting edge, working with some of the finest technology companies out there in this regard. And led by a woman, not only here today with her, but a woman who assumed the ranks, and they have not missed a stride as a corporation. And so we're going to hear a lot about that as well. And then Fred Craig, look, when I saw him a few days ago, we bumped into each other, and he said, good to see you, and I'm working on the purple line. I'm leading that effort. He's the CEO of that effort, and he wore purple today to just so everyone, just so everybody would know. But now, look, he also told the president and the chairman, he said, look, if I'm going to wear purple, I want the two of you to wear a little purple as well, since we're going to hold up this line as an important line whose time has come. And so these are our speakers. And so what we'll do is we'll come back to Jack now. Again, they'll all give brief introductory remarks. Listen carefully, because we're going to pivot on some of the points that they'll make, and then we'll have a very robust discussion. Okay? All right. Very good. Jack.
Thank you, Secretary Slater, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Brad Mims is on the board of MWA, and our chair is Warner Sessions, and vice chair is Earl Adams. So when I got a request to come here today, it was obvious I'm here. But let me just say that I came from Reagan Airport this afternoon, and this morning, throughout the day, the FAA is holding a conference, and the conference is all about job opportunities within the aviation industry. And we had the Secretary of the Air Force and the Secretary of Transportation there. And the bottom line is that they talked about the fact that there's a need for some 14,000 pilots going forward. There's this huge gap in terms of electronic technicians and maintenance folks that are needed by all of the aircraft manufacturers. And it was very interesting to hear them talk about the need to reach out to communities that hadn't been reached out to before to kind of fill the gap, okay? And so when I think of myself, by the way, before coming to the airport, I was the Postmaster General for 10 years. So Secretary Slater said I have transportation background. Well, we had the largest fleet in America of vehicles, and spent, when I get interviewed for the airport, they said, what makes you think you know anything about air transportation? I said, I spent $3 billion a year flying mail, so I know a little bit about how to get there, okay? But what's very interesting is that when I got to the airport, there were two things that were there that I think I'd like to talk about. This notion of technology is something that is very interesting from a perspective of, think of yourself running an entity, whether it's an airport or a corporation or WMATA. And when I looked at how we handled it as an airports authority. What we basically did was we contracted out the management of our IT. I had some 15 people managing IT. And there's something wrong about that, because now I'm giving all the money to big companies. And if you're a big company, what's your first interest? Your bottom line, okay? And so one of the things, working with our board, we decided that, and we did the same thing in engineering. And what we had was, we had a challenge, and the challenge was we were literally giving them the opportunity to run our business. They were making decisions, and the first priority for them was themselves, not the airport. And we came up with a strategy that said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to think internally, and we're going to hire people to do that thinking, and we're going to approach the marketplace different. It was kind of an, who knows who kind of a network versus offering opportunity for people to compete. And so we took these big contracts, and we took them and we broke them down. And so there was a transition period. You can't just, turn the faucet off. You have to, keep the lights on. But as an example, for design contracts, we used to have one contract to help with design and with construction. And that's in the engineering field. Today we have 10. and their task order contracts. In some cases, in the case of design, 100% went to our locally disadvantaged business enterprise program. But it's all a matter of mindset. Now, what do you get out of it? Why am I interested? My interest was to make sure that I had people who put us first, because if you give somebody an opportunity, and it's the first time that they are not a sub, but they are a direct contractor to you, that, from a reputational standpoint, is gold for them. And you know you're going to get their best effort because they want to prove themselves in the marketplace and they want to say that they had that relationship with you. Similarly, in IT, we're doing the same thing. And we've went from 15 people, I told you earlier, we have over 100 people today. And it's probably the most diverse group of employees I have, other than I wish we had more women. So I hired a lot of engineers, brought some work in-house. We got to get more women into that field. But the bottom line is, as employers, as folks running entities, when you step back, I think the best thing that you can do is approach contractors or big institutions by talking about what's in the business interest of that institution that makes a process that I just described to you a lot more attractive. Now, when it comes to the workforce, and by the way, let me just, before I get off LDB, one of the things from a technology standpoint is minor technology. It was very hard to become an LDBE contractor with MWA. You had to fill out multiple pages of paperwork. Submission was not electronic. We weren't giving, contracting opportunities out electronically, hard to figure out. Everything's done electronically now. You submit your application electronically, it gets turned around to you. Every quarter we put out what are the contracting opportunities that people need to be aware of. And now we're starting to target those opportunities, knowing a little bit more about the folks that are on an LDB list. In addition to that, we looked at the surrounding jurisdictions. And there was a program in Washington, D.C., and we went to the folks that were part of the ACDB program and said, how come you don't sign up for MWA? They go, oh, that paperwork's a disaster. So we just said, okay, if you qualify in D.C., you're part of our program. You just have to fill out a one-pager and say, I want to be there. Because if we reach out to you and consider you, a viable contractor, we want to know that you're going to respond. Because we still buy our lease, because we are on federal lease, we have to have a competitive situation before we can do a set-aside. On the employee side, hey, we're competing with everybody. So we set up, and you think about the workforce and the old guard versus the new guard. We set up apprentice programs for plumbers, for electricians. Why? You bring people in right out of high school who've gone to technical school. You bring them in, you do the training. And there was a concern that the old guard wouldn't accept them. Well, if you make it in the old guard's interest, it is there. They buy in. And if you're 55 or 60 and you have a lot of heavy lifting to do, we put these apprentices with them. And I have to tell you, it's amazing to watch the people, just one, get the help with the heavy lifting, but two, people love to share their knowledge with one another. Now, we've done the same thing when it comes to supervisors and some of these technical jobs. We have an intern program. We are very proud that we are now promoting people from within for supervisory programs, but you have to give people entry. Whether that's a contractor, there's got to be a path for entry, or an employee, there's got to be a path to entry and an opportunity to develop, and we're very, very much focused on that. Again, starting with the leadership at the board, we are totally committed to putting programs in place that enable people to do business with or work for the Airports Authority.
Thanks, Jack, and we're going to come back. There were a number of issues touched on, so hold your questions, and we'll come back. So we're going to go straight down, and then we'll come back with the queries. Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. Closer. Okay. My name is Rena Davis, public policy at Lyft. I've been at Lyft for about 3 years. It's truly an honor to be here. I'm a Howard alum, so it's a special thing, and a former intern on the Hill, so it's kind of full circle. So huge honor to be here with these panelists and with the secretary and with the representative. Briefly about Lyft, for me, kind of coming in 3 years ago, we were a company, I think I was employee number 646. And at the time I thought, oh my goodness, everyone's been here forever. I'm late to the party. And now we've got about 3,000 folks working around the country and in Canada. So we've grown exponentially. But one of the things that's pretty remarkable from a government relations and a public policy standpoint is the evolution of the company within that time. And the Secretary is very kind in terms of the things that we've been able to do from the beginning. And I think it's very much because of our founders' ethos. It's because of why they founded the company, which was to improve the world with great transportation, which is what Lyft is all about. And that touches on a lot of the things that the representative was discussing earlier in terms of getting to your medical appointments on time, getting to work, having accessibility. There's a number of different parts of Lyft that cut right at that issue of having opportunities, being able to access opportunities that are already available to you. And so that's one of the things that I think we're really proud of, being able to grow those services with things like Concierge Platform, where you don't need to have a cell phone to book a Lyft ride now. Your doctor can book it for you. Your child can book it for you, or you can book it for your parents. And it can take place all online, so that the folks that don't have smartphones aren't left out of the services that they provide, because they still have that need. And they don't even know that there's some of these things, these options available for them. So we wanted to make sure that there were tools there that made it easier for folks to access our services. I think also one of the things that the representative touched on was that there's this kind of revolution that's happening, this third transportation revolution, as one of our co-founders puts it. And it's going to involve a complete transformation of our cities. We're looking at autonomous vehicles. We have now scooters and bikes all over the place where you can share and pick them up at docks or just on the street. And I think that there's a number of different multimodal aspects of transportation that are all starting to come, to converge, from traditional kind of legacy carriers, from airplanes to cars, but now to even much more what they're calling, I guess, microtransit models. And so I think for us, it's really about kind of bringing all those things together and leveraging them for the power of the good, for the power of community, and really paying attention to what things are needed. One of the really exciting things about being at Lyft is, and it's going to sound kind of bad, and I might get in trouble for this, but the number of products that we've launched a number of products, and some are successful and some we have to pause because maybe the market isn't ready. But the fact that we keep trying and we keep doing and innovating and paying attention to what folks need is something that I think we're all really proud of, and we're excited to continue and look forward to having a conversation about the different ways that we converge with the panelists.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Mendez, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Division President for HNTB. And I had a quandary around this panel because I'm part of our company's Human Resources Advisory Group, and our meeting yesterday was in San Francisco and ended at 5 o'clock California time, right? And there's this panel, do I miss the advisory group meeting? I can't do that. Do I miss the panel? I can't do that. So thanks to Dulles Airport and the flight schedule, I got that red eye and was able to get back here in time so that I could be here today with all of you, because this was not something that I wanted to miss. So I work for a full-service engineering company that focuses in the transportation space. We're about 4,000 people with 70 offices nationwide. We're a 104-year-old company. There are a lot of good things about being a 104-year-old company, and there are a lot of opportunities for innovation being part of a 104-year-old company. Not only are we a 104-year-old company, we're a 104-year-old company in the transportation space, okay? Can you think of any more slow-paced change, construction maybe, than the transportation field, right? I mean, think back 100 years ago, how did people travel? They walked, they rode horses, they rode bicycles, planes, trains, and automobiles, okay? So there have been some upgrades in some of those products. We decided the horse was no longer efficient, and we left the horse behind. But, here we are 100 years later, until enter the disruptors, right? The disruptors.
In a good way.
In a very nice way, in a very positive way.
That's why
right?
we sat them next to each other.
I'm not sure why it's called disruptors. I mean, it's agents of change. It's the positive opportunity to enhance and upgrade our aspirations and, what might be possible, right? So here we are, the Secretary mentioned, we're at an inflection point in transportation. Here we are with one of the slowest moving, stable fields intersecting with one of the fastest paced, unpredictable fields, right? And so the challenge is, how do we bring those fields together? And how do you prepare your workforce to do that, right? Because there's a tremendous different level of investment required to keep your workforce constantly up to speed on the changes in technology, which is very different than training them once to do predictable processes that aren't changing much. And now suddenly, not only do we in our own work environments have to be up to speed with technology and change the way we design in 3- and 4-dimensional design, virtual reality. It's a long way from yellow trace and vellum and all the drafting desks, right? So now we need continuous education and improvement, and we need our workforce to be excited about that, right? And not feel that it's something that is out of their reach or something they don't have time to invest in when they're trying to balance caring for their families and all the pressures of modern day living, right? So, our commitment to our employees is changing. And I don't know, somehow we got in this space, and I'm saying a large we, society got in this space of the disposable worker in the 80s and 90s, right? There was an excess of people, and you could always just find another person. And that just isn't true. People are precious, right? So companies were unwilling to invest in their people because if that one didn't work out, we'd find another one. So that model is not useful going forward with the level of investment that's required to bring people, to enable them to do their best and achieve things that they never thought were possible. Our objective now needs to be the employer of choice and the best place to work for you. And what that means for us as leaders is that we have to constantly evolve and change. Our definition of job responsibilities. Why should a young person who wants to get a different experience have to leave our company in order to do that, when we could create a space for them to be able to have those different experiences within our company? The other thing that's changed is our attitudes towards our business partners and the companies we work with. Instead of having transactional relationships of convenience around a project, we instead now seek to form lasting relationships so that we know how to work together. And we have a partners program that we're very proud of at HNTB, where we work with new, historically underutilized businesses, small businesses that don't have the benefit of 100 years of experience to draw from, who are new to the field, but who also can teach us things because of the entrepreneurial spirit and the innovation that they bring to the table, right? So it's a wonderful, mutually beneficial exchange, and we grow together. And we're proud that with many of our subconsultant partners, we work with them on multiple assignments all over the country, and we bring each other into new markets and expand our reach. So, we're in an age that requires a lot of digital dexterity, right? The flexibility and agility to change what our priorities are, But at the root of that is a commitment to enable our people to excel in those changes. So I look forward to sharing stories with everybody else and learning from you in the audience as well as my fellow panelists.
Very good, very good. Thank you.
So that's a hard act to follow. My name is Nalini Mani, and I'm with Metro. Certainly not. I see a lot of nodding heads. Well, that's nice, and thank you for that welcome. I was introduced as the principal strategic innovations, blah, 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 and I could go on about that, right? In a nutshell, what I do is looking at innovation within our workforce. How do I build a workplace? How do we do that so that we can bring in innovative ideas, right? New outlooks, a sense of belonging, sharing of knowledge, and really diversity in thought, in culture, and in people, because that's what it's about. I'll share a story. I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1993. And I have ridden the bus and the metro since, back when there were no buses to Tyson's Corner, and you'd have to get to Vienna and get on the Fairfax Connector, and then maybe hook onto the 14A that would take me up to Jones Branch Drive. I didn't think back then that I'd be working for Metro today. But it's great because I see it in a very different way. I've done it. I've ridden those rails, and I have complained, and I have worried about the weather. But I get it. It's about the customer at the end of the day. We think about doing business these days. Everybody's heard these business terms, right? B2C. What does that mean? Business to customer? No. The new way is business to individual. It is about the individual experience. So that's what we're looking at Metro. That's what I'm committed to looking at by looking at our workforce to say, how do I bring in that hive activity? We call this a Braintrust. This is what we are, right? We've got great ideas. How do I build that within my own organization? It's a hive. We've got great ideas. We've got fantastic ways of looking at how we do things from the eye of the customer and from the eyes of the employees. So that's what I'm committed to, that's what Mr. Wiedefeld is committed to, and that's part of our people agenda. I will say one of the things we're trying to do, and that resonated with me, Diana, when you said employer of choice. People have so many opportunities available to them today. Rightfully said, we're competing with everybody, but what makes us a place where people do want to come and stay? Not just for a job, but a true career, meaningful career. One of the things that we're looking at is, this is the way we've always done it, right? We recruit people, we bring them in, we say, hey, you've got to have 10 years of transit industry experience. Really? Perhaps it's about bringing your new way of thinking. It's innovation, it's knowledge, it's what you have to offer. I can teach you transportation. Bring me your thinking. So that's some of the new ways that we're thinking of bringing in a diverse workforce into Metro who can deliver on what our customers want, right? Getting to from point A to point B in the most safest, reliable manner possible. And it's not just about, as you rightfully said, right? Smartphones and having the ability to look online and say, hey, I can go here. How do I reach out to those who really need it for their day-to-day work? How do I then, you've got, Good Hope Road or Good Luck Road? There's one bus. How do we connect those people there to their jobs? So these are some of the things that we're looking at very closely. I'm looking at from a workforce perspective. What I'd like to say is, everyone talks about recruiting. Right? That's our big challenge. Let's go out bringing the best and brightest. I say let's switch that dialogue. How do I retain the great talent I have in the workforce? Is it that you come in for a job as a bus operator and you remain a bus operator? No, perhaps you want to go into finance, maybe in HR. Maybe you just want to go and become an engineer. How do we give you the opportunities to do that so that we're retaining that knowledge? We're building from within. People talk about the big knowledge and the brain drain. Well, that's great, but I don't want to lose what we're good at. What this institution was built on was thought, How do I retain that? Well, you know, you've got a 25-year-old in the workforce. Let's build a mentorship program where we're sharing knowledge, right? We're looking at someone who's 25 working side by side with someone who's looking to retire. How do we bridge that gap? Teach me, show me. I'll bring you something new, but then what you're imparting to me is how things are really done and what makes sense. So those are some of the commitments that we have at Metro, and that's what I'm committed to doing. And I hope that this dialogue here is you giving me your ideas, because that's what a Braintrust is, right? It's not me sitting here and saying, here's what we're doing at Metro and we're the best. No, it's everyone at this table and all of you sitting here who have a very important contribution to make to us, because we serve you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank Congressman Cummings for inviting us here today to what is bound to be a really fantastic forum. And thank you, Secretary Slater. Look forward to the facilitation that you're going to do here today. I'm Telva Magruder. I'm from General Motors, and I have this title, Director of Facility Engineering and Manufacturing Operations for GM. That's part of what I do, and the title means something. But all of us at GM are committed to a few key things. And, you know, given that we're here in front of everyone in the transportation industry, I'm sure that most of you have heard about our commitment to zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And as Secretary Slater mentioned earlier, you know, we're led by a fantastic CEO, Mary Barra, who has pulled the senior leadership team together and came up with that vision for us. And it was interesting when we all first heard it, it was like this mix of, oh my gosh, this is awesome, and then what? You know, right? Right? How do we do that, right? We're a company full of engineers and analytical people, and you know, and how do we do that? And I'll tell you, we're committed to do it. But the reason that we're committed to do it is because we believe in the future of this country and of the world. And we believe that in order for people to have more value in their lives, in many of the ways that were already mentioned, they need to feel safer getting to and from work. And they need to feel like it's important for them to get to and from work. And some of these barriers need to come down. And so one of the challenges that we surely recognize is that in moving forward into 000, we have to do it in a way that people can afford, particularly in our urban communities. You know, we can't do this and have it not be accessible to every person, because we intend it to be accessible for every person, and that's a big challenge, and we need great minds for that. And we need technologies that haven't even been invented for that. We need awareness that isn't necessarily being capitalized on in greater industry and cross-corporate discussion yet. So we need diversity of thought and new ways of thinking, because we too are a company that's over 100 years old, trying to do something right now that is imaginable, but you know, hard to make real, right? But so some of the things that are key in us doing that is, you know, I'm recognizing that we're inventing things as we do this. We're using absolutely breakthrough technologies to create vehicles and experiences that people will love, right? Breakthrough technologies. And so we have to take some risk. And so we are creating partnerships with smaller companies, with more diverse companies, with people and ideas that we historically may not have connected to. So what that means is we're going through an exercise of opening our minds. And when we think about what we need to do to ensure that you know, minorities are able to engage in this workforce, one of the things we need to do as leaders in these companies is open our minds to what might be possible, right? And be serious about seeking new ideas, because in doing that, we're going to then start developing the workforce that we want, right? The team members that are going to be able to bring the ideas that we want. So we first have to open our minds to that, and we're doing that by new partnerships. We're doing that by reaching out into communities. So one of the things that we may get to discuss today is community engagement, and how do we seek to reach out into the communities and touch hands and eyes and look in the face the future, right? And those that we want to be excited about what the future holds. Because if we can tap into that and support them earlier in their lives, then now they'll develop a passion for things like transportation and things like the technologies and the financial acuity and all that that's needed for the future of transportation. And so we are forming partnerships with other companies to achieve our vision, but we're also forming partnerships in the community that are extremely important. So that will allow us, as we challenge the what and the why and the how we get things done, to listen to the questions that come from young ones and different thinkers, and say, oh, wait, we hadn't thought about that. Culturally significant change requires culturally significant change in the way we think about our pipeline, okay? It also requires significant change in the way we think about the value of the individuals in our business. And one of the things that we're working on at General Motors is really taking a really good look at not only the skills that people have, but the passions that they have. Because we all know people that are in roles that aren't perfect fits for who they are. Okay, so as we think about tapping into the change in technology, there are a lot of people that already exist within our ranks that have passions around these future technologies, and we may just need to recognize that and light that passion up and have them reach out to others. Okay, so there's so many ways to think about the challenges that we have. And I'll just end with a quick story. Congressman Cummings mentioned that, the story of the drug addict that said, you can have all the services you want, but how do I get there? And just yesterday morning, I was leading the board meeting for Girl Scouts in southeastern Michigan, and at the start of every board meeting, we have a young lady that comes in and talks about what it's like to be a Girl Scout. And she's a senior, and she's talking about it, and we said, well, what can we do? Because we're creating leaders in Girl Scouts. We said, what can we do to support you? And she said, you all do a lot of activities and everything, but you have to be sure that we can get there. We need to be able to get there. We want to do robotics. We want to learn the code. We want, so we're talking about future female leaders, which we need in technology, oh, by the way. So one of the things we may want to think about in transportation is how do we connect the future contributors so that they can actually have access to the things we need them to have access to be big players in the future. Okay?
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Craig. I am the CEO of Purple Line Transit Partners. I feel like the associate minister on the Sunday after Easter. What else good is there to say after you've heard all that? So I feel like I should be sitting in the audience. But Brad asked me to do this, and I was looking at some of the statements here, and one of them was, how do we overcome the inertia and resistance to change in the current aging workforce? And I thought he was probably talking about me and suggesting I retire early. But I want to thank Brad. Brad has been an icon to me for 20 years working together. And he actually introduced me to one of the companies that graduated from Diana's firm's partners program that we are working with and have worked with a couple of times and are trying to help them with business. And I think what you heard up here a moment ago is technology is important, but the investment in finding people who want to do a job they love is probably the most important thing we can do. My mother said to me, find a job you like and you'll never work a day in your life. And so there have been a lot of days where I was really working, and there were a couple of days where I felt like I had hit the dream opportunity, which is where I am now. Extraordinarily difficult project, first of its type in the country. And it has a great many opportunities, and it has some very significant challenges. One of our goals is, of course, economic empowerment and employment within the project team, both during construction. Over the next 30 years, we're going to spend close to $5.5 or $6 billion in this region. I have with me Alfred Isaacs. Alfred, would you stand, please? Alfred is one of the people in my office who works on nothing but economic empowerment and opportunity for all of the projects and all of the purchasing and all of the things that we do in Purple Line. So the Purple Line is different because it is a radial project. Instead of going from the suburbs to downtown, it connects across 4 of the metro lines. It connects to Amtrak. It connects to MARC. And so by doing that, it gives somebody an opportunity to, instead of going all the way back down on our, I believe, marvelous metro system, I hope you'll give them an applause because they have done a wonderful job. But one of the things that the Purple Line does is allows someone from Silver Spring to ride to New Carrollton or to one of the other places where they can connect to eventually VRE or to Virginia Railway Express or to MARC or to Amtrak, which gives people who are dependent on transit a reach that they would never have had before because they can go to Boston or Atlanta or eventually Florida. But it also gives them this opportunity of how do I get to the university hospital? How do I get to a new job? How do I get to the drug services that I need? It provides a different type of service that hasn't been available in this country or in this region previously. So it's a big change. About 2 weeks ago, I walked through several of the employment centers along the Purple Line, and both Montgomery County and Prince George's County have a huge minority population that is in many cases underemployed. Not unemployed, but underemployed. And the reason that they're underemployed is perhaps there are 2 people in the household who work. They have 1 automobile, which means the other person is either walking or taking transit. And I walked in and I saw, first of all, I saw people from all over the world who've come to this country because of the opportunities, people who are seeking employment, and they were looking at me as the person who was going to provide them that mobility. And so when I think about this from a personal standpoint, it is very important to think about it from the standpoint of the user's perspective. And everyone here on this panel, from the vehicle manufacturer to the transit operator to the designer and construction manager to the airport to the last mile lift systems, all of them have a role in getting people to these jobs. We have a shortage in the construction industry alone in this country of 750,000 people. My biggest concern on the Purple Line is getting it built and having the resources to do it. Not the money, the people. All you have to do is fly into Ronald Reagan International Airport and come across one of the bridges, or ride Metro, which I usually do, and look at the number of tower cranes here. Tower cranes are the best barometer of the health of a community that I know of. It is the best measure. Construction jobs are generally well-paying. In a community like ours, there are opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And so we have a very robust program in trying to help people find those jobs. We have a training program, actually one that Representative Cummings created for National Targeted Workers. And so his long arms have reached all the way into the project and help us identify people in the community who may have some employment skills but need to go to that next level to get that next level job. So I want to tell you a little funny story in closing. So when I was this was a really long time ago, about 30, I took my 10-year-old son into the Smithsonian. And so we walked through the Museum of Science and Industry, and there was an abacus, a slide rule, one of the first handheld calculators, and a couple of other things. And so I'm sitting there with my son proudly saying, I used to have one of those in college. I had the first handheld calculator. And there's this little 6-year-old kid standing next to me. He goes, Mom, that guy's so old, he used one of those. But the reason I bring that to your attention, is this. This telephone has more technology in it than was used to send people to the moon. And this phone could have an opportunity for the people to use it, to find a job, to call a lift vehicle, to get to that first mile, last mile, to really leverage transit. Because transit is the wave of the future. Both of my children grew up in households with automobiles, each of them having their own. When they chose a place to live, they both chose places where they didn't need a car. They were like completely on transit or Lyft or Uber. I hate to say that word in front of you, but There are other firms.
It's okay.
So, but my point is,
Sam second.
my point is that people are making choices about convenience, their experience, and the opportunity to take advantage of this great country. It's got issues. There are lots of storms. I feel very sorry for the people in North Carolina and South Carolina right now. And the people in our country are weathering other kinds of storms. So I thought his start today was very poignant. But I just want to think about, in 15 or 20 years, I've got to build the Purple Line in about 4 or 5 years. I have a drop-dead date. Either I drop dead or we meet that date. But my point is that we have about 4 or 5 years to build it. We are going to be short of people, I'm very sure. We have a 30-year concession to operate it. How do you design a vehicle today that represents the kind of technology change that goes from a slide rule to a cell phone? Yeah. And so that is going to require some really smart people. Machines don't do it. People with passion do. Thank you.
Well, we're going to get right into some questions for our panelists, and let me just do a sort of a time check for everyone. We've got good time. We're roughly at 2:45 right now, and as you know, we plan to close out things at 3:30. So we've got good time. But you've been really given some meaty things to chew on as you've listened to all of them. And so let's just get right into it. But can I say one thing? You heard the word mindset. I think that's critical. All right? There's a growth mindset and there's a static mindset. You know, static, what is always going to be. Growth, we don't even know what the possibilities are. I also heard a comment about, you know, we try and we fail, we try and we fail. I mean, if you're not doing that, then you're not living. Because that's what the arena is all about. It's to be engaged, and you try and you fail and you come short and again. But in the end, as Theodore Roosevelt said, you don't find your place with those poor and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat, because you're engaged. And so we've heard really, really good stuff. So let's just get right into it. I started to see a few hands right here and then over here. So let me go here right first. And please give us your name and maybe say where you are as far as your professional connection and that sort of thing. And you notice she's holding that mic, right? We're going to do that. We're going to do that because we want a question. But let's start right here.
How you doing? Barry Wilson.
Yeah, Barry.
I've been working with Ramada for 19 years.
Ah.
And I heard some great things that were mentioned up there.
Yes.
And I just couldn't sit here and actually, you know, sit here quiet without sharing my side.
Okay.
As an employee standpoint. The morale of the Ramada employees right now is at an all-time low. You know, we are 80% minority. And it seems like as of lately, it's been contracting out. There's been all type of policies implementing punishment for employees, whereas us as minorities, I don't think we will last that much longer in Ramada. They have random background checks, absenteeism policies. You have to call in 3 days before you go sick. Just things of that nature that changes the whole morale. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now, I think we got the spirit of it. Okay, we're good.
Yeah, so those are some of the things, you know, random background checks. And it's just us as under attack. You know, they're trying to take out benefits and things that of that nature away. You know, you all heard about the Republican Comstock, Tim Hugo, those in Virginia. Just us. I just wanted to share that at a Black Caucus, that us as African Americans, who pretty much are 80% that make up the employment at Ramada, are pretty much facing maybe just privatization and getting us out of there. Our families, we spend countless hours at work, and we can't even afford to live in this region.
I think we got it. We got it. Now, are there any volunteers to answer that? I'm looking at you, Nalali.
No, I just called ma'am. So, God, that makes me feel old. No, sir, but thank you. And I will say this. I hear you. And I want to thank you for bringing that up. I mean, this is difficult. It's not a hard thing to say, and it's actually very courageous for you to come out and say that, because that is exactly what we need to hear.
Okay.
And I will acknowledge, here's the thing, as someone who's trying to make the workplace a better place for our current workforce, I will acknowledge that that is precisely the kind of thing I want to hear. That's the ideas that I need from you to help us solve. That's something I've heard. How do I put this? I haven't seen solutions to that yet. So I would invite you, and I'm going to give you my information to come talk to me. Let's figure out a way to solve exactly that problem. How do I make sure that you as an employee are valued, that these concerns that you talk about, you're right, random background checks. There's a reason why they're talking about the absenteeism policy, right? And how do we cut costs? How do we start making things better? You're right, those are all business decisions. But how do I make it a good experience for you? So at this stage, I wish I could say, hey, I'm going to address it. I'm going to fix it. Here's the silver bullet. I don't have one. But I would like to invite you to work with me so that we can solve exactly this. WMATA is looking to be employer of choice. I can't be employer of choice if my employees inside the organization aren't talking about what a great place it is to work.
Okay,
So
very
I
good.
would like to put that out there.
Excellent. All right, very good. So look, we're going to keep it going with that sort of thing. Here we go. Yes. We're going to hold the mic. So
Oh, you know what you mean?
we're going to hold the mic. So
I don't really need it.
yes, I am. I'm coming back.
So, I want to talk a little bit honestly about what's going on in transportation.
Well, but we were going to go to questions, though.
This is the question.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
So, we talked about the horse and the buggy and the changes in transportation and disruptive technology.
Yeah.
We are really going through a period right now of disruptive technology because of the demographic of young people who have switched now to riding bicycles and scooters. And what's that? And the numbers I've seen as it relates to the public transportation is they're starting to lose money. And the question is how are we facing that dilemma of having young people say, I don't need public transportation anymore. I can get a bike, ride to work, a scooter, and I think
Okay.
even, some of the, the alternatives is the regular taxi cab. So we're going through this change, and I wonder, are you guys really looking at what that means
Okay.
to society?
Yeah. Very good question. Yes.
I'll take that on a little
Rena.
bit since I'm probably the only one here that has bikes and scooters on our platform.
Rena and Jack, and then we're going to. At that point, I do want to get to the congressman. We know that he's got a vote that he'll need to take shortly, but we're going to hear a word or two before he leaves. So, I'll tell you what. If we could, let's just hold it right there. And Congressman, can we come to you now and then? Because yes,
Thank you very much.
yes, sir.
Were you the one to answer the question? Just now. What I was going to say, I couldn't know. As I listened to your question, I heard your frustration, and I'm not surprised. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. We have to make sure we strengthen our unions. I'm just telling you. We have to make sure we strengthen, because without the unions, folk will run over you. I'm sorry. I know I may be stepping on some people's toes. Just here recently, Johns Hopkins is a major employer in my district. They hire 30,000 people. And after having spent 6 months in Johns Hopkins, I got a chance to see Johns Hopkins from inside and out. And so the nurses came to me and said, we want to unionize. And I'm going to tell you, I said, and I know I shocked them, I said, let me lead the way. Yeah, you can clap. There is an attack. Listen to me. In my committee, on the oversight committee, there is an attack on unions that you would, it is ridiculous. And so what I'm saying to you is one of the things that we have to do is figure out ways, working with the Congress, hopefully, when we take over, to try to help defend unions and to strengthen them. And with this Janus decision that came down, that doesn't help. But we still can be supportive of those unions, because I think when we come together, that's where our power is. If it's just one by one by one by one, and I'm not just talking about I'm just talking about generally. What I found that so often the employees that complain or whatever, they're kind of picked off. You know, the next thing you know, you turn around, they ain't got a job, or this one they've got demoted, or they got so frustrated that they don't want to stick around. And what I'm saying to you, we gotta try to stay where we are and fight the good fight. I know it's hard. But we can't. We got to figure out how do we make sure that not only we get the rights that we need, and so that our morale is lifted up, but so that we make a pathway for generations yet unborn. A lot of people in this room got your start because of a union, and so I just wanted to throw that out there. And again, I've got to vote, but I want to thank you all again for what you are doing, and because I know we're going to get through this, and I want to thank our panelists. Rodney, I want to thank you, and you all go ahead and ask your questions.
Okay, thanks, Congressman. Thank you. And thanks for being with us today. So we'll go back. We've got a question on the floor, so we're going to respond to that. Then I've got one or two questions as well, and then we've got a few hands here. So we've got the time. But Rena, let's come back to you if we can, and then we'll go to Jack.
I think in to kind of piggyback on what the representative was saying in terms of unions. My dad was a union member, a vice president of his local union, worked for Muni actually for 31 years. And I thank him for being able to go to law school in his pension. But I think, to the question, things are changing, and young people are deciding not to get their driver's license, definitely not to own a personal vehicle. But I would actually, respectfully push back on the idea that they're not using public transit, because that flies in the face of what our data at Lyft says. In our most mature market, which is San Francisco, we've been there the longest, and we have, a healthy demand not only from the city of San Francisco, but the outer, outlying areas, places like Oakland, where I live, even East Oakland, where I actually live. And I think when you couple those changes with the fact that, according to our data, 60% of Lyft rides start or end at public transit, that kind of turns all of those things on its head. And I think folks are truly using this kind of transportation ecosystem that you see represented by folks here, and they're picking and choosing for the different needs that they have based on season, based on where they're going, based on what they're doing. If they're going to the store, maybe they will take a Lyft. If they're just going down the street to have a bite, maybe they hop on a scooter there, but they had a couple of drinks and they want to take the bus back because it's going to ride right past their house. I think empowering folks to know how they can leverage different resources is something that we're very vested in. One of the things that we've just rolled out, and we'll be doing this across the country, is integrating transit into our app. And so what will happen is, and people will think this is crazy, but it's something, again, that gets back to the ethos of our founders and why they founded Lyft, was to eliminate this vacancy, 80% vacancy rate in cars, is that you may be down here at the convention center and you want to get up to U Street for a bite to eat, and they say, you know what, rather than take a Lyft for $7 and put another car on the road, you can walk, it'll be this amount of time average, or you can get on a scooter, you can get on a bike, you can also get on the metro, take a bus. So we want to make sure that folks understand there's a number of different options, and it plays into, we're kind of talking about storms, yes, and this element of climate change. Eliminating those small trips is something that's very important to Lyft, because that's part of what contributes to some of those things. So we want to make sure that we're moving in that direction.
Yes, excellent point. And Jack, let's come to you on that.
Yeah, so let me just build on that a little bit. The introduction of Uber and Lyft into kind of the mainstream has really affected airports. So today, better than 50% of pickups at an airport are Uber and Lyft versus taxi. And so you can have this mindset, and I'm going to get back to what Secretary Slater said. If your mindset is that we're going to hunker down and we're going to resist change, then it's problematic. And so the notion here has to be, okay, a message is being sent. I don't think it's negative toward transit necessarily, because ultimately I agree with what was just said. Transit is going to continue to grow. And I think there is an effort underway by WMATA. There was a big meeting just this week that I participated in. There were over 120 folks in the room from all sorts of transportation entities, multiple counties. The unions were there. And the bottom line is everyone's saying, okay, what do we want to accomplish?
Yes.
You know, with the setup, the establishment of a network. And it was kind of, there was some consensus around you should be within 400 yards of transit, a bus. So that you have an opportunity. And then how do you design that? And then what provides that service? It could be that transit equals Uber or Lyft or some other entity providing transportation in some remote area as opposed to something that's fixed and high cost. You know, I was in the Postal Service, and just think about the post office. The challenge there was mail was going away, okay? It was being replaced by you paying your bills online and receiving bills online and advertising going online versus in the mail. And what we did was, and probably very few people in this room know it, I was a union member. I grew up American Postal Workers Union, okay? My father was part of the National Association of Letter Carriers. We worked together and said, okay, here's the challenge. That's going away. What's important? What's important is that we had people that work for us, and they were first, not the unborn, because sometimes people with the unions were saying, hey, I want to grow to 1 million members. No, it's the people that were there. So we eliminated, over the course of a decade, 200,000 career jobs. Now, I'm not proud that we lost career jobs, but I'm proud of the fact that no one was laid off. I'm proud of that it was done with the union. And at the end of the day, those families that could be supported by the movement of mail were supported. So I think what we all really need to do is say, change is upon us. Right. You cannot stop change, but you can become part of the solution. And you can make sure that people are taken care of, and you can make sure that the job opportunities that exist, if you go up in a transit family, those job opportunities now might be a Lyft career, might be an Uber career, might be some other career. You have to embrace the change. Think about folks who grew up in a telephone without a digital phone. I remember I had a cousin who went to work for whatever it was, T-Mobile or something, and everyone in the family was criticizing, what are you doing that for? You should be over there with AT&T or you know. And it's like, you know, they're solid. Those guys are, you know, they're fly-by-nights. But no, they're taking over, you know. And so, again, this notion of we got to figure out how to embrace change and make sure that we're doing that, at the same time taking care of that transition. That includes the employees who were in the original organization. It includes migrating them over. And part of the migration, I'll give you an example of something very simple. We were migrating, you know, in HR and our finance systems, we were migrating to a new system. So what we chose to do was, we're trying to figure out how do we get employees to really kind of get off this notion that I need to sign in for this for finance, I need to sign into this for some HR function, this for some other. So we decided to move payroll first. You want to get paid, you have to be able to put your hours in and say your checks. And
that's incentive.
And then everyone said, okay, I get better know this system. There was no resistance because they got it, but then it just kind of set the path. But again, it's a matter of you do have to embrace change, and again, it's, you know, for the betterment of society. So at the end of the day, if you stayed on the same path that you're on with Metro, you got to also think, will people buy that service? And you got to make sure that you continue to be affordable. So long-winded way of saying, I think we all need to work together, and we can accomplish many things.
Yes.
Sure.
Now I want to, can I do this? I've got some other hands. I really want to keep it going if you allow me to do that. Can I do that?
If I can just
Okay.
most of the public transportation systems in this country, minorities are workers, just like the gentleman said.
Well, but yeah, but now that's a good question. And I think that question was answered in part of the answer here. The question was, change is coming. We can be a part of the solution. That's really what today's discussion is all about. How do you place yourself in the mindset of knowing what's coming so that you can fashion roles for yourselves in that new world that's coming? That's what makes it exciting. But I'll tell you, if we are focused on what is to be lost rather than what is to be gained, we will always find ourselves looking down rather than up. So that excellent point, excellent point. And I think we are right here to discuss this. Now let me, if I may just make one other quick point, and I want to go to something that Rita was talking about. She's been talking about the character of her company, all right? There is also a debate going on about what is corporate America and how does corporate America play its role? I mean, is it to damn with everybody else but me and mine and how we reach our goals on the bottom line? Or are these companies to be concerned about the communities in which they serve and the people they serve?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that even if you examine Adam Smith on this question, many will say, I want to embrace what he talked about in The Wealth of Nations, where it was about the bottom line and the invisible hand. But if you look at the first book that he wrote that talks about the moral sentiment, it's about relationships with people and how people working together make things happen and how there is give and take. Right? There are those who choose to emphasize that which they wish to emphasize for their own purposes rather than for the good of the whole. And you have to listen carefully to who's doing the talking and whose interests they're representing. And you could not have a better panel representing the most visionary companies than you have here in this moment. So let's continue to get the questions to them. And Brad, I'm going to get to mine, but I really wanted to get the audience engaged. We've got a few others that we'll ask at the end, but I really want to get the audience engaged, just like we did with the gentleman who just asked a question and a good follow-up. Yes.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
My name is Quincy Jones.
Well, wait a minute now. No, go on.
Check an ID.
And, excuse me, I want to cling to the comment my brother made earlier. Him and I work for the same company, WMATA.
Oh, okay.
I'm a 12-year union representation. I mean, union rep. I've been representing individuals at the company for over 12 years. He speaks the truth. Right now, the morale is all-time low. But my question is to Mrs. Namie Manning.
Yes.
Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
When you were speaking, you spoke of commitment, and you combined that commitment with your boss as well as ours, Paul Weederfield. Paul Weederfield hasn't been committed to the union since he's been there. It's been there, it'll be 3 years in January. He hasn't sat down and met with the union, not once. So when you speak of commitment, my question to you is, how are you going to maintain your commitment to the employees when you don't have the commitment from your general manager, who's supposed to be with you committed for the public and the people, the employees who run the company, right? And it's being run poorly since he's been there.
Well, I think we've got the question. We've got the point. So let's get an answer, and then we can go on.
So
all right?
again,
Because we're dealing with this question twice, and I'm okay with it, but we do have a number of other hands, and I do want to try to get to those. But I think we've got the question. Is that okay?
no,
Okay.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, again, for bringing, that's really important, and I thank you for bringing that up. You're right. Our history hasn't been stellar when it comes to engaging with our employees and with the unions in a manner that makes sense, right? I will say this myself, right? One of the biggest things that my job has been or should be, and is going to be, is building that partnership with our unions, to have discussions before we put things out there and say, hey, this is what we're doing as a company, right? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about why it makes sense, or perhaps talk about a point of view that I might not have because I'm not a member of that union. I don't see the workforce on a day-to-day basis. I can't speak for Mr. Wiedefeld's engagement with the unions, but what I can say is this: he is committed. He does walk the railroads. He does go out to the rail yards. He does go out to the bus depots, and he talks to you, or if not directly you, certainly your colleagues. He listens to them. He comes back and he brings those to me to say, hey, these are some of the key concerns our employees have. Can you help us figure out a way to make this a workforce that is committed, that is passionate, and that wants to work for us? So that's the commitment that I'm sharing with you. That is a challenge. I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to wax poetry about how fantastic it is. That's a challenge I have taken on. And so my commitment to you today is that we begin to have those dialogues on how to make Metro a good place to work for someone like you, for someone like this fine gentleman here who brought this issue up, and that we can move forward together. I will probably say that that probably doesn't answer your question completely. You probably have a lot more questions around that, but at this stage, I'd say the only thing that can be done is through a partnership. It can't be an us versus them. It may seem that way. It isn't that way, and I can commit that on the part of Mr. Wiedefeld. I can certainly commit that on my part.
Okay, very good. And all of this has been stated in the company of a crowd of witnesses, so I think that the commitment is there.
No.
Now, I want to go back here right now. Yeah, we're going to do that.
Absolutely.
Let's go back here.
I can commit to that.
Okay, very good. And then I'm going to come to this side of the office, and then I'll come back. Okay, but right here in the blue. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't have them. Oh, okay, very good. All right, very good. We're going to keep it going.
I'd just like to say first that I don't work.
But if you'd like to, we'd love to have you.
Well, my name is Larry Akinyoye. First, I'd like to thank all the distinguished panelists on their insight on the transportation. My basic question is, what is your thoughts and insight on economic development and transportation projects in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area?
Ooh. Oh, Philadelphia. Okay, yes. Why don't we? I mean, there are a couple of people I think who can answer this, but let's maybe HNTB.
Sure.
Since you're definitely in there.
I'll start out. So, Philadelphia has a rich history of transit, and transit can be used to spur economic development and increase the reach and opportunities to have jobs related to that economic development. So there are a number of pretty exciting initiatives going on right now in the city. One of them is the King of Prussia extension, which would take service out to a major economic center from downtown, and King of Prussia has emerged as a great employment center. And so that's one. Another one is the Glassboro extension over to New Jersey. Again, making that connections between economic centers and employment centers and residential areas. So those are two that immediately come to mind. Also, there's initiative on Roosevelt Boulevard. Roosevelt Boulevard is one of the most dangerous arterials in the country. And there's an initiative around trying to make that not only safer, that's the first priority, but the second priority is to make it more walkable and accessible, less of a throughfare, so that development can more easily occur around the access that it provides. So those are three off the top of my head. I don't know if those are the ones you had in mind, or there was another thought you had.
No, that was great. Also, like impact on Amtrak or like local bus services.
Yeah.
There are also great initiatives going on around the redevelopment of 30th Street Station, and Amtrak has a program that's nationwide where they're looking at the retail and commercial opportunities at their stations and partnering with the local community and local developers to try and make them more economic destinations.
Yeah. And go on.
I was just going to quickly add that I think this is an opportunity that Lyft takes, kind of a couple of different approaches. Number one, obviously, folks can get themselves onto the platform and offer rides. That's kind of a pop-up transportation option for folks, along with economic development coupled together. But I think number two, we're starting to see a lot of local initiatives, a lot of different measures to try to get funding for transportation, and Lyft has actually started to weigh into a couple of those debates. So I think that's one way that private industry can be helpful in terms of not necessarily passing the buck, but in partnership, again, kind of coming together and figuring out how do we leverage different resources, and how do we make sure that we're putting ourselves and our brand and our kind of might behind local initiatives that will help to benefit the communities in which we're operating, and not necessarily that are going to give dollars to Lyft, but literally to improve rail transportation, improve Amtrak, all these kinds of things that add to the mobility ecosystem that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a particular project that is starting to get some news. It's called Maglev, and it's along the Northeast Corridor. It's supposed to be a service from Washington, D.C. to New York that can, with stops, make the trip in less than an hour. So keep that in mind. I mean, this is major. The Japanese have actually, they've taken the technology that was developed here, they've enhanced it, improved it significantly, and there is a potential partnership there between the U.S. and Japan on this particular project. So that would create significant opportunity for investment along the route. I'd also be remiss if I didn't take you back to some comments that Jack made early on, because it dealt with this question, but from an aviation vantage point. He said that they took big projects and they broke them down to give individuals of modest-sized firms the opportunity to compete as a prime contractor rather than a sub. This is significant. You don't want to dismiss that as being insignificant, because a lot of times an opportunity can present itself, but it's so large that you cannot manage it with some of the businesses in our community. So he said that. I wanted to acknowledge that. The last point, you may not remember this, but and it came to mind when you were mentioning Philadelphia. I mean, you know about Mother Bethel in Philadelphia and Richard Allen. Well, we got some assistance from the Postal Service and Ron Stroman working with you, and we got a stamp honoring Richard Allen. Richard Allen was the founder of the AME Church with Absalom Jones, and was the forerunner of African-American leadership in this country. And again, there are people who play roles that you never know about, but if you have an opportunity to say thank you, then I think you do that. So, Jack, thank you again. We got a question here, then back here. All right, and the time is still good. We're gonna hold the mic.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Shannon Lawrence. I'm the secretary of the Southern California chapter of COMPTO. So thank you for being here. So my question deals with, especially if you want to address it from a technological standpoint or just a business operation standpoint, and it's for any or all of you. It's two parts, and you can answer either one or both. What do you see as the biggest challenge or hurdle to diversifying and diversity inclusion, or diversifying and including them into your workforce? And the second part to that, is, do you and your company, do you have any best practices that you could share with some of these leaders out here with their respective companies that you've seen worked in order to diversify your workforces even more, that we can take back to where we work?
Thelma, can I ask if you would maybe take the lead on that, And then, I mean, I know that everyone can actually respond to it, but you were actually touching on some of these points in your earlier remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. I would, if you don't mind, Secretary Slater, just
Yes.
make a quick comment on what you said about contracting.
Sure.
And it does touch a little bit onto this.
Mhm.
You know, one of the ways that we get diverse talent in our workforce is we identify it in companies that we work with, right? So as people grow in their career, we've partnered with them on different projects. They then will maybe join us in the future. But one way we look at construction, and I do a lot of construction in my activity right now and have over many years in different ways, is we take big contracts and break them down, but sometimes we also have a company that's a sub that we purposefully work to develop into a prime. Okay, so we have a strong initiative with diverse business partners where we're developing them as suppliers so that they can grow. And so we have examples where we've done that, and now they are prime, and now they're subbing to diverse companies as well. And so we actually put metrics in place, and for ourselves, as well as metrics for them, so that if you're prime with us, we expect you to bring in diverse suppliers. So I just wanted to throw that out.
And I think that's excellent. And I'm going to go back here and pick up another, but can I say this about GM? You know, there's a lot of talk about tech companies, and my next question, which I'll close with because I want to get the opinion of everyone on the panel with this, but there's a lot of question about the lack of diversity within tech companies. But when you've got strong Midwestern companies that have been around a long time dealing with these issues, that have had a union presence and that sort of thing, as they now combine,
yes,
that's going to give us a great opportunity to actually populate some of the tech companies with very capable, seasoned, mature talent. So we just want to put a pin in that, and I think you're going to see that play out more and more over time. Remember, there was a thought in the beginning that tech companies were going to not only disrupt, but totally turn on its head a lot of the old line companies. But those companies didn't stand in place. They became smart as well, and they brought in significant talent, and they started to take on. And then what they finally realized was that it's through the marriage, it's through the synergy of the two, where you can really have the kinds of breakthroughs that allow us to compete internationally. So
absolutely, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah,
we
okay.
Absolutely do that, right?
Yes.
We do work to identify the new ideas and the new talent by virtue of these mergers, and then encourage the development of talent that is already seated in some of these companies. Or sometimes we say, hey, well, we can bring them in and have them be with us.
Exactly.
And then also reaching out to HBCUs and things like that.
Exactly. So
Okay.
keep all of that in mind. Now, we're going to do two more questions right here.
Hi, my name
And
is
then I'm going to come to you, Miss. Okay. Okay, so we've got three more questions. We're going to Okay.
Hi. My name is Brian Cartwright. I'm CEO of Final American Mile, a national last mile delivery company.
A little louder, yes.
Hi, my name is Brian Cartwright. I'm CEO of Final American Mile, a last mile delivery company network on a national level. We've heard about technology as somewhat of an imperative that's affected all of us. But what I haven't heard today, I've heard unions. I'm from Detroit also, so we know unions. That's in our blood. What I haven't heard today, and I'd like to get everyone on the comment from the panel, is what is the opportunity in this app economy for independent owner entrepreneurship, independent business development, small business development, so that people can own, you talked about Adam Smith, own their own means of production.
Okay, and let me ask, this was my question, and especially as technology comes into play. I was going to do it at the end, but let's take it now, and then we'll still do the last two, okay? And I think we can wrap it up at that time, right, Brad? Okay, so that's a very good question. So why don't we take it in turn for anyone who'd like to start out? I mean, we've got a business owner here, by the way, who has a great voice. All right, so we've got a business owner, and he's wanting to be a part of this new wave, and it is a wave, and it's going to either you know, it's going to engulf some companies that aren't ready, but it's also going to embrace others that are. So let's.
I'll just speak to that quickly. So, you know, I think the first thing is to have a product and know that product's going to fit into the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we all look ahead, you know, being at the forefront of that thought so that you can bring ideas to, you know, companies that are investing in the community and saying, this is what we've got, how can we make it fit, and this is how, what can we do? We've got a lot of venture discussions that are going on, and many companies like General Motors are talking to entrepreneurs, learning about their products. And then we are not necessarily forming partnerships. We are absolutely saying we support this product and this development, and then later we'll merge with that and bring it into our technologies. So you have to know the business though, and you have to come in strong, come in absolutely strong. And then I would say also, you know, fight for your position. Know what makes you strong as a company, because so that you don't get engulfed, right, as an entrepreneur. We at GM have had to teach ourselves how to let these companies thrive without us trying to turn you into us, right? And so you have to really learn how to assert who you are. Lyft, right? We started with Lyft in that way, and now Lyft is like off and doing awesome things, right? Yes.
Point well taken. Excellent. Oh, and Jack, and then we'll close it out and go to those. Oh, okay. Then we'll go to these. But I think you got it. That's good. Okay, yes.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Nellens-Page, and I'm with the Texas High Speed Rail Train. How you doing, Mr. Secretary?
Doing well.
Down in Texas. So all the people at WMATA, you're not happy, come to Texas when we get the railroad built. So I'm going to solve that real quick for you. But I'd like to talk about, I used to work at WMATA, though, 3 months from being invested, but I digress. I'd like to speak to the point of what are you doing as far as construction? Because we talked about the deficit. What kind of creative ideas do you have in terms of hiring construction contractors to do some of the work from a worker's standpoint, as well as a business opportunity standpoint with minority and women-owned businesses? Because we have the same with the $15 billion project, and it's Japanese technology again. So there is a lot of opportunities that are going to be available, but I need the creativity of recruiting, especially to build it.
Okay, very good. And Jack, I think that's WMATA, and I think that's
I'll do it.
And the Purple Line. That's right. I think it's all three of you.
So all I can say is you got a hell of a problem. But you got a much bigger problem than I do, but congratulations for taking it on. Let me give you a little history about something. I remember when Woodrow Wilson Bridge was underbid, and Great American Ballpark, which I was running for the Cincinnati Reds, was underbid at the same time. They put out very large concrete bids to where they only got 3 bids. And they were well above the engineer's estimate. Of course, they had to be rejected. So on the ballpark, what we did is we broke out all the concrete work into foundations, rod busting, flat work, vertical work, and precast. The bids were a lot of small companies that were allowed to bid. The other thing that we did is we looked out and looked for mechanical electrical companies that were minority businesses that could participate in the project. There were none within a 300-mile radius. This was 20 years ago, 300-mile radius of Cincinnati. So what we did is we went out and found some majority firms and teamed them up with firms that were growing and developing. I sat on the board of one, and that company is a majority in the sense of size participant now. One of the things that we really do try to do is break things down into biddable quantities for the firms that are available to bid the work. So you got to know what's available out there.
Yes.
I'm genuinely very concerned about just capacity in the workforce across the country because of the fact that there are so many unfilled construction jobs. Some of these are skilled, semi-skilled, but these are jobs that if you train people, they have a job for life in construction. It's the largest employer in the country.
Exactly.
So that's really, I don't have any magic bullets. If I did, I may be coming to see you, and maybe you can tell me. But I think it is breaking it down, giving people opportunities, doing wraparound insurance, keeping firms from having to post bid bonds, but doing a wraparound insurance, being creative to get them in the marketplace.
Yeah. And I think many of you remember the Adirondack case, right? That was all about participation. Federal Highways was very creative, very aggressive in that process, and it resulted in the lawsuit where the whole program was tested. And those were in the early years of the Clinton administration, and I remember our tagline became, "Mend it, don't end it." So we recognized that there were some improvements. We did that, and we were able to preserve that program. And it still exists, and it does represent an opportunity for engagement. But again, as has been noted with Fred here, they have to be of a size, Jack said the same thing, where you've got people who can bid those projects. And it doesn't sort of, it's not so large that a company can't be a participant. Okay, very good. So one more, and then we'll start to wrap up. And then, yes, Brad is going to come up and wrap things up.
Before we go to that, could I just
Yes.
add,
Mm-hmm.
let me just add one point. My chairman's here, Warner Session, and he's taught me, if anything else, when you're approaching a big job like this, don't just look at the blue-collar jobs.
Yes.
Look at breaking down those the
All
upper
of it.
jobs and the legal support, the engineering support, everything that you have behind it. Look at, because I think that will be an attraction to the community as well.
Yes.
And they will pull people along.
Yes.
Okay?
Thanks, Warner.
So
Thank you.
Now you have
Yes.
caused me to have a special request for all of the people who are talking about providing jobs for small businesses.
Yes.
Because I'm from an organization in Alabama, if you don't want to hold it. So I'm from a company, this is hitting me hard, a construction company, excavating and paving company in Huntsville, Alabama. And it is tempting to grow fast to get some of these projects. Even if you break them down, they could be big for a small company with less than 40 employees. And in our business, if you just start hiring up people, somebody is going to turn that excavator over and hurt themselves. So now you're wanting me to make an appeal that we hold the line on safety, because of course everybody is interested in economic development. They are going to want to grow. And in the current climate of our administration, everything is against worker safety and environmental protection. And so if it's going to be about growth, and sometimes that can be fueled by greed, what are we going to do?
Well, yeah, but I'll tell you, safety always has to be the top line. I mean, those are legal obligations, responsibilities. I do think that we've seen examples where companies, because of a commitment to growth, they've gotten themselves in difficult positions. And companies have taken note of that, and they have made a commitment themselves not to fall into that trap. But safety is the top priority. And that's why I just loved the comments about 000. I mean, that's a commitment to safety. That's zero crashes. I mean, and some people would say, now that's, that's impossible. Well, unless you stretch yourself, you don't really know what is possible. And with technology, and you take out the human factor, and you give up some of that freedom, you can improve the safety of the transportation system, 100-fold almost, because 95% of the accidents are the result of human error. That's in the vehicle, that's in the plane, that's everywhere. And so your point about keeping an eye on safety is a good one, and I'm sure that everyone here is echoing the sentiments that we will never, ever give on that point. So point well taken. Yes.
I just wanted to make
Rita.
one comment before we close out, and I know that we talked about it a little bit in terms of diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
And someone was asking about best practices, and just very briefly on that point, one of the things that was mentioned, I think only one time during our long discussion, very interesting discussion, was about retention, and I think that's a huge part of, you can recruit all of the folks that you want into your company, but if you're not, kind of addressing some of the things around exploring their talents, helping them to elevate, then they don't necessarily feel like they're welcomed and they want to stay. And that's one of the things I think that for Lyft we put a lot of emphasis in. We have employee resource groups that we started our second year in existence, where some tech companies haven't been in existence for 20 years and haven't started them. But I'll just close out also on the fact that a number of folks in the tech community are starting to release numbers around diversity.
Yes.
And we have also done that. And I think that's one of the best practices that's been carried out through the tech community, which is holding yourself accountable.
Yes.
Admitting you have a problem, and then holding yourself in a very public way, holding yourself accountable. I can say that we've done that,
Yes.
tremendously, such that, when I am in the office, I look around and I say, oh my gosh, there's another new diverse face over there that you don't know. And it's really great to see that. You can't even keep up, whereas before, we all knew, each other's names.
Yes, yes. Can I, point of personal privilege, if I may, and Jack, I'm coming back, it reminded me of something, Rena, on this point. You mentioned T-Mobile, right? And I said to myself, ooh, because I'm on the board of Verizon. And it's interesting because in years past, when T was mentioned, it was really AT&T, not T-Mobile. I mean, T-Mobile is a disruptor. It is a fine company. But I am on the board of Verizon. But I want you to take note of one thing, because I think it sort of speaks to this issue. Verizon just made a CEO decision. And it was all about 5G. It was all about 5G. That doesn't even exist yet, but it's coming. And the point that we were attempting to make is that that is going to revolutionize everything. We want to be there first. In order to get there, you got to have the right leadership. But go back and look at some of those, recent stories. And the other thing is, it's going to affect smart cities. It's going to affect, autonomous vehicles, all of that. But it's just beginning. So you can be on the ground floor of all of that. And there will be other companies besides Verizon, clearly, engaged in this battle. And so just take note of T-Mobile, take note of AT&T, take note of Sprint, take note of Verizon, take note of all of these companies that are committing themselves to work with other companies to create this new world. And hopefully you will be a part of that. With that, let me turn it to Brad. Let me just say again, Brad has been a supporter of Compto over the years. And I'm thinking of Julie Cunningham and just all of the great people that have made Compto what it is. And recently, Compto made the request to Brad that he consider, taking over the helm of the company. And that's not an easy proposition. Organizations are hard to lead. You got to raise the money. You got to keep things going. And that's hard for a president. That's hard for a chairman as well. But these two individuals, Chairman Fuller and Brad, have stepped forward. And I've told Brad he's always been there for me, anything he asks. And I know we can get others like Secretary Fox and Mineta. I mean, you're going to have this community working with Compto as we go forward. So I'm just here today, but I speak for all of them, including Secretary Chow and members of her team. We're going to be here to be with all of you to make good things happen. So again, thank you.
Thank you. So, how many of you enjoyed this session this afternoon? I know I did. Thank you so much. Again, on behalf of Compto's Board of Directors, Chairman Fuller, our board, and all of we have COPs, we call them our Council of Presidents, and members of this organization. We just thank you for your participation in the session this afternoon. We've heard a lot of views. I've had the occasion of working with pretty much everybody on this stage. I serve on the board here at MWA, and I probably have worked with 3/4 of you in this audience. So I love transportation, been in it all my life, and there's nobody who's been more supportive to me in my career than Rodney Slater. So let's give Rodney a hand. And then I just want to, again, let's give this panel a hand because they were great. Now, one directive I've gotten from my chairman is we follow this up. We're going to continue to follow this up. We're going to have our Women Who Move the Nation season, and we're going to have our annual conference. And we're going to continue this theme and continue to evolve this theme as we go forward as an organization. So please be assured that you'll continue to hear from us on this particular issue. Activities for this evening. We have one other activity. We have partnered with the Black Caucus of Michigan. Nicole Stallworth. Is Nicole here? Where is she? Oh, there you are, Nicole. I'm sorry. We're going to hold a reception, and we're honoring a number of icons in the transportation industry this evening at Bobby Van's restaurant. That's at 12th and New York Avenue. That's from 5 to 8 p.m. We're partnering, again, with the Black Caucus of Michigan, with the Laborers International Union. Is someone here from Lyona? Okay, Lyona, and I've had a relationship there as well, and then with Compto. So we look forward to seeing all of you. Did I leave anything out? Did I leave anyone out today? Okay. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.